Hello everybody and good morning. Welcome to the MLM Lunchtime Leadership Show. So we are going over the book, How to Have Confidence and Power in Dealing with People, and we're on chapter 8 today. But before we get started on that, we're going to go ahead and invite some people onto here. Doo-doo-doo. All right, so chapter 8, how to develop the skill in using your words. So success often depends on how much upon your ability and inability to talk, as much as your ability to build an organization. Because if you can't get the words across to people that you want to, you're not going to be able to build a team because nobody understands where you're trying to go. So Wilfred Funk, editorial director of Your Life magazine, made a study of thousands of successful men and women looking for the common denominator. So he found that the one thing that all these people had in common was the skill of using their words. He found earning power and word skill is closely tied together, and that you can safely expect to increase your earnings simply by increasing your power in words. So then he goes into how to strike up a conversation. Some people, this comes easier than others. Sometimes it's a matter of people don't feel comfortable coming out and talking to people. So the reason so many people find it difficult to be a conversationalist is that they're afraid that they're going to say something trivial or obvious, or they don't want to come across as insecure in any way, or they don't feel like the conversation's adequate for the occasion. So you want to stop trying to be perfect, because you really don't have to be. Most of us have an entirely false mental picture of what's expected of us, and small talk isn't supposed to be brilliant, but it's necessary to get the wheels turning. Because if you don't start the conversation, how are you going to know, A, if this person is a person that you want to talk with or show your business to, or if this is just somebody you will keep it at the small talk and then move on. So, how to warm up your subject and how to bring out interesting talk from others. So get them to talk about themselves. You do not look for a topic that they could talk about. You just need to get them started talking about what they're an expert on, which is themselves. Which is why we like to go through form. This is the easiest way to remember how to start a conversation with people. And as you get better at it, it's going to get easier. So if you're new to this show and don't know what form is, or if you've never heard the term before, F is for friendly. Hi, how are you today? O for occupation. What do you do for work? R for recreation, and then the message. So it goes from hi, how are you? How are you doing today? What do you do from work? What do you like to do when you're not working? And then your message, hey, could you do me a favor? I'd like to show you what it is that I'm doing, so if you run into the right person, you could refer me. That's the easiest way to get this in front of people without coming across as you're trying to get them. So U-turns and green lights keep the conversations going. So a good conversationalist is not about being the smartest person, but opening up the other person and getting them to talk. So if you can stimulate the other person to talk, you will acquire the reputation as a good conversationalist. Also, knowing when somebody doesn't want to talk is actually more important too, because you can get people talking, but if they're just giving you really short answers, let that person be. Because you don't want to keep dragging out trying to force small talk with somebody. If it has to come across as forced, just leave that person alone. They don't feel like talking. But if they're genuinely answering and they're like, oh yeah, I do this type of work and yada yada yada, I moved here with my wife some time ago, it's like, oh cool, where did you guys move from? And then you can go off on the conversation. But they're like, I'm an attorney. Then it's like, okay then. Be like, oh nice. And then you can ask a couple more questions just to see if they do want to converse, or if they are like, look, I'm just here to get my coffee. But you have to get really good at reading people to a point to know whether or not do they really want to have a conversation, or do they just want to be left alone. So if you can stimulate other people to talk, you will be that good conversationalist and known for it. So traveling and reading also have a lot to do with this, because the more things that you experience and go out and do, the more you're going to be able to relate to different people. Because just like how we went to Destin, Florida, if you happen to run into somebody who said, oh yeah, I've been there, or I'm about to go there, the questions that you can branch off of from using form are going to be able, you're going to be able to talk about a lot more things. You're going to be able to ask different questions, but you want to keep the questions directed to them. The moment you make a U-turn and it gets directed to you, you lose the person. You want to keep the conversation to them, but you can say, like as an example, I'm like, oh cool, do you like seafood? Yes. Did you try this place? Or once you go down, you need to try this place, because it's still directing the conversation to them, and it's saying that I've been here, you should try it, or did you try this? But it's still keeping that conversation on them, because people love to talk about themselves. And if the goal is to get that person, to pre-qualify that person and see if this is somebody you want to work with, you want to know as much about that person as possible, and you don't need to talk about you unless they ask. So how to ask questions to interest others. Keep the conversation on the other person's interest by asking questions why, where, and how. If they say, I grew up in Indiana, where at? Which high school did you go to? Kind of branch off of those questions depending on how they answer. First day of autumn. Already the days are getting a lot cooler. Yes, it is, Becky. It's coming fast. So a daily sin in human relations and how to avoid it. So everyone wants to shine and express and to impress others but you will rate much higher if other person's estimation if you turn the conversation onto them rather than turning it onto yourself. So good questions to ask yourself. What do I really want from this situation? If you're working in MLM, when you're meeting new people, the goal is to see if this person is somebody that you want to work with, or if this is somebody you would like to show what you're doing, which is where the do me a favor script comes into play. But sometimes after talking with people, I'm like, you know what? You don't need to know what I do. It's a judgment call of who the person is and what are their ethics. And if they have a good attitude, because you don't have to have everybody on your team, and whoever you bring onto your team is also going to affect everybody else in the room. You want to make sure you're bringing good people and good energy with you, and one bad person could wreck the whole group. So you want to make sure that whenever you're sitting down with people, you don't have to have absolutely everybody. Some people, it's just like, you know what, I don't think this is for you. But you need to make that judgment call based on the questions that you're asking people. So do you want to inflate your ego, or do you want to show your business to this person, is what you need to ask. So when to talk about yourself. So the time to talk about yourself is when you are invited and asked to tell about yourself. If the person is interested, he will ask you. And when they do offer you an invitation to talk about yourself, do not overdo it. Tell them enough to make them feel like you are comfortable with them and you're comfortable sharing the information. But once you've shared, turn the spotlight back onto them. Turn the conversation back. So use the Me Too technique. So if somebody says that they grew up on a farm, you could also say, oh yes, I did too, if you did. I can say that because I actually did grow up on a farm. If somebody's like, oh yeah, I grew up on a farm, I'm like, oh yeah, me too. What farm did you grow up on? What was the focus? Did you do cattle? Did you do horses? Did you do sheep? Like, where was the focus there? And they're like, oh yeah, we worked with sheep, and then we can go off and talk about that. But keeping it on them. So this also creates almost like a bonding. It almost creates something similar to a bond, because it's that familiarity of like, oh, this person knows a little bit. It almost creates this person knows me type of thing. The magic of agreement. So we like people who agree with us and we dislike people who don't agree. So even if there are points where you must disagree with the other person, always seek some points where you can agree with them. And then you can say, but I also think this. But you want to find a couple, and they're more likely to accept it if you're able to agree with them on a few points. But most times you really just want to keep things to happy talk when you're first meeting somebody, especially when you're trying to work with them or see them. Keep the conversation positive, because to be the person who adds energy to the group, not somebody who's sucking life from the group. Because people like people that are positive and high energy, and if you're constantly talking about what is something bad that happened, or this happened to me, that happened to me, oh, this happened to my family member, and it's always surrounded around negative topics, people are not going to want to be around you. And people can pick up on that in when you first meet them too, because the first conversation that they start is when they ask people, I'm like, oh, how are you today? The person's like, it's fine. It's just fine. What do you do for work? Oh, I do this. Oh, really? What got you into that? It was just something to do. Okay. What do you like to do for fun? Nothing. I just like to sit at home and watch TV. I don't like to go out. I don't like people. It's like, okay, I don't need to continue this conversation anymore. Have a wonderful day. And then you continue. But those are the people that they just suck the energy out of you, compared to somebody who's just like, oh, it's a wonderful day. Oh, I like my job. This is why I got into my job. You want to talk to people who are enthusiastic and positive. So if you do have a moment where you have a bunch of negative thoughts going through your head, he had this suggestion: sit down and write yourself a letter. I've actually practiced this before and it does help. So you can go into huge detail if you get out a notebook or go on your computer and just write yourself a letter. Write down everything that's wrong, get it off your chest. And the best thing about writing these issues down is it actually helps you think things through and think of ways to improve it or how to fix the issue. And the other thing is when, depending on what's going on, sometimes if you're not around a group of people that can help you with the situation, and you are by yourself and you don't have that role model to give you the advice, it could actually help you go through and fix the issue rather than talking about it. Because honestly, we've all had those friends at one point where you could bring an issue to them, but they don't necessarily help. Like, their advice is not actually going to help you. And based on their experience in their past, their personality type, they're going to handle it very differently, but not always in the best way. So that's one way to do it. And it also makes you feel better. If you just need to talk about something and get it off your chest, it's almost as good as talking to another person. I found, because I've actually done it. So, what your friend won't tell you. So avoid teasing sarcasm directed at people you work with. Sarcasm always has a cruel element about it, and it always concluded to make the other person feel small. So you don't want that to come across, especially when you first meet a person, but even as you get them onto the team, you want to avoid any sarcasm and teasing, because you can hurt somebody's feelings. And even though you might think it's funny and you're trying to poke fun and just have a good time, the other person might not feel that way. So you kind of want to avoid doing that. And honestly, even with my group of friends, I only have one friend I can tease and be super sarcastic with, but she's also a person where if I'm being super sarcastic with her and we're teasing each other, if one of us crosses the line, we don't feel bad if we turn around and we're like, hey, that's fucked up. Don't do that. That was not okay. I draw the line right there. And it's like, oh shoot. And then I'm like, okay, that's cool. Like, okay, I won't do that. Yeah, do that again. Note taken. But I only have one friend I can do that with. There's some people, like occasionally I do have a hard time with this, because if I like a person, I like to joke around with them, and occasionally I do like to tease, but that's the household I grew up with. We all like to nitpick at each other to no end, but it's a very nasty habit I have, because occasionally I can rub somebody the wrong way, and I've gotten a lot better at it, but every once in a while it does sneak back up on me, and I'm like, oh shoot. And I'm totally fine with if people come up to me and they're like, you know what, that actually did kind of hurt my feelings. I'm fine hearing that, but most people are not comfortable coming up and approaching you and telling you, look, this actually hurt my feelings. I actually didn't like it. Most people, if you hurt their feelings or if you make them feel uncomfortable, they'll just completely ignore you. And that's where people are like, I don't understand why this person's not answering my texts, not answering my calls, and they're not coming to any events. What's going on? And it's like, okay. And sometimes a third party can go talk to that person and then they'll bring it up. But you have to be very careful of what you're doing with the people on your team, because not everybody is going to think that the things that you're saying is funny. And it might not come across the right way. So it's just better to avoid it altogether rather than hurting somebody's feelings. So with that, that's what I got from this chapter. Become a good listener and ask the right questions and keep the conversation on the other person, not on you. So that is it. Do you have any comments?
No, it's one of the hardest things to do. I mean, that's period. That was one of the things that I worked very hard to figure out. Still not great at it. But the better you become at it, the more you'll recruit. So that's it.
Yep. So with that, I'm going to upload these videos to YouTube, so if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel yet, you're more than welcome to, so that way if you'd like to go back and rewatch these, you can do that. And also go follow our page on Facebook, the MLM Lunchtime Leadership Show Facebook group. Oh my goodness, that was almost hard to say today. But anywho, if you haven't joined that group yet, go ahead and join it, because these will also be uploaded there. And we will see you guys tomorrow with Chapter 9.